taking a walk.
A lot of artists and a lot of people get pigeonholed all the time. And I've always hated that concept of pigeonholing. I don't understand it. I don't see the logic behind it. For me, art is art, photography is photography, music is music. It doesn't matter what genre or where it comes from.
Welcome to the Taking a Walk podcast, where Buzz Knight explores the lives and legacies of artists of all kinds. And today is no exception, as Buzz is joined by Julian Lennon, whose life has been shaped by his legacy, his personal exploration, and his advocacy. Julian's carved a path in the music and philanthropic world, which continues to leave an indelible mark in both worlds. He emerged as an artist at an early age, working not only in music, but in the world of photography as well. He continues to push the boundaries of his creative and artistic side while continuing to focus on his commitment to environmental conservation through the White Feather Foundation, which he founded in 2007. Julian has carved a path which is fascinating, and he joins Buzz Knight on this episode of Taking a Walk right now.
Julian, congratulations on your new photography book, Life's Fragile Moments. I'm so grateful that you're on Taking a Walk. Can you tell me how excited you are to get this out for the world to enjoy it?
Very, very excited. And it's been many years in the making, in fact. I had hoped to have done a book sooner, but, certain things happen at certain times for certain reasons. And I think certainly this was an opportune time. And the publisher to Noise, came to me earlier this year, approached me to do a book. And, they said, what do you think? What would you consider? How do you want to approach this? And I said, well, listen, the reality is that the majority of the people out there don't even know I'm a fine art photographer. So for me, the best way forward that I can see is that the book is a retrospective of sorts, or should I say, an overview of the better work from all the collections that I've done over the years, to give people an indication of what I get up to when I'm behind the camera. It was a very, very difficult project to work on with very little time, and I'll explain why. Is that I had the opportunity to do the book, and I also had an opportunity to do the biggest exhibition I've ever done, and a museum exhibition in Venice over the past couple of months, alongside the Biennale. So I had the opportunity of doing both of these things. But they were separate projects, but I wanted to bring them together so that the book would release at the same time as the exhibition was going to come about, et cetera, et cetera. That's why when I agreed to this, that it became a really tough cookie to work on a number of levels, because in order to get the book finished, edited, published in time for the opening of the exhibition, we had to work on it yesterday. All I can say is I was very thankful for the publishers and the art director, Jan, because he was a lovely guy. Now, I can't imagine trying to work in a virtual world or like this, because the publishing company was based in Berlin and I'm elsewhere. So we had to work through mediums like this. And so editing down hundreds, if not thousands of images for this book was very, very painful. And the reason being was the fact that a lot of my earlier collections, especially, were anywhere between 30 and 50 photographs. And those were from thousands, edited down from thousands. So being told that we need to take 50 images and make them 5 images to represent that collection was a daunting prospect. But the editing process, although very, very scary at the beginning, became a real learning tool in how to really focus, how to really express the important stuff and the important images from such a vast choice. And so going through all the different collections, it was certainly tough at the beginning, but as time went on, and we only had a few weeks to do this, and this was literally 9 hours a day, face to face, with my artistic director, Jan, going through the files and folders. Barely enough time for the bathroom or a cup of tea, dare I say, and never mind food. But at the end of the day, an incredible learning process. And I think, I mean, I'm beyond happy. I mean, I was almost tearful when I first. This is the first one that came off the press, and it was in my suitcase. It's a little damaged, but I still kiss it every once in a while, like the Blarney Stone, for good luck, because I can't believe, that I finally done it. I wasn't sure it would ever happen. So to have the biggest museum exhibition I've ever done, and the book out at the same time is so, so special. And, you know, again, it's been available since the exhibition over in Europe, but, it's just going to become available in the US early December. So I mean, very, very excited for people to see this stuff. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, believe it or not, over the years in trying to do the best job I can at what I do, and to take on another medium like photography. There are always a lot of naysayers, but again, I think you just bury your head in the work, get on with the creativity, get on with the focus of what you want the end result to be. And I couldn't be happier. And I think the title represents the book and its contents remarkably well. It was not my title, although it is a lyric title from a song of mine called Disconnected. But Life's Fragile Moments really did represent all of the elements that we see in the book, all of the different collections, the flow, the feel of the book, the overview, and the overall feel of it. So I think it's worked really well, and so far so good. Buzz. So far so good.
Well, it's going to make a great Christmas gift, certainly for.
If you say so. If you say so. I didn't say that.
I definitely
I'm with
say
you.
that. And for me, it's going to make a great one to give to my wife, who happens to be a photographer and is a amazing fan of your work.
Oh, thank you kindly. That's lovely to hear. That's lovely to hear. Funnily enough, I'm always surprised to hear that. It's a weird thing. I've always related that to music, obviously, in the past, that people like what you do, but then hearing it about your photography I mean, it's the most pleasant thing I could ever hear, believe you me. But yeah, again, I've worked hard at this, and I think there's some good stuff in there, and that's I'm very proud, very proud.
I want to come back to photography, but I do want to talk about you being, throughout your career, sort of a master of multiple, wonderful pieces of work, whether it be your film, whether it be music, whether it be the children's book aspect of things. Did you get this diverse set of interests early on in life?
I've always been interested. Always been a bit scatterbrained as well. I mean, they call it ADHD these days, or whatever, ADHD. I'm all over the place all the time. But yeah, I've always found, if I can't find a way forward with one thing, or I need a temporary break from it to breathe, then I can't just sit around on a beach twiddling my thumbs. I have to find something else to do. Photography became a major player in that way. Yeah, it's whenever I found myself at a loose end, or I need a diversionary tactic, just so I can come back to things. And I think the same thing with also works with writing books, and the same thing works with putting collections together, or even editing documentary films. It's that same kind of thing, and I've always enjoyed doing multiple things. I think I'd lose my mind if I just stayed the one course. And the fact of the matter is, even though I took very large breaks in between a number of albums in the past to actually live and breathe again. I did over 30 years of my life doing music, and I thought, you know, to have an opportunity to work on another medium that interests me, that I can still be creative with, and also the reality being, for the first time ever, I could be behind the lens, was something that I really, really enjoyed. Because I can do the in front of the camera stuff, but it's not my favorite thing to do. It really isn't. And I'm much, much happier behind the camera lens, and behind the scenes. I don't mind coming out and saying, lifting the rock up and waving every once in a while, but that's personally, as far as my level of happiness in life, or contentment, that's where I prefer to be. So I'm still working. I'm still doing all of these jobs, wearing all of these hats, but just in a different way than I did before, and more focused on the work and the creativity, rather than what's expected from the outside. You know.
So you kind of were reading my mind for my next question. A perfect day for you in terms of happiness, it sounds like just being incredibly busy and working on multiple things is a perfect day. Is that correct?
Pretty much so. Yeah, on the creative front, yeah. I do find, and I have to say this, and I have an incredible manager, Rebecca, who I work with these days. It's more of a partnership. We discuss everything uh, beforehand, but more often than not, you can tend to have to deal with a lot of admin with many, many art forms. I'm not one also to just say, no, you go and take care of that, as a manager, or otherwise. I have to be part of the process all the way down the line. Unfortunately, the admin can bog you down sometimes. I mean, there's been days before Rebecca came along where I was micromanaging myself. I'd literally wake up in the morning and there'd be 100 emails at my desk. And as I'm working through that, I'd finish the first 30, and, want to go and get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. And by the time I come back, there's another 30 to 50 emails. And it became this endless, insane cycle of, where's the creativity? Where's the main focus of what this is all about for me? That's been crucial for me, to keep an eye on that, and an eye on the balance of keeping that where it should be, keeping still doing it, but keeping it at bay, because it's been so admin orientated over the last few years, with exhibitions and books and that. I mean, the creative elements of that have been exciting but exhausting too. But I really want to look to the future, especially beginning with next year, really, and think about what I want to create and where I want to go and what I want to do. Get back to that again, because without that element of it, there's nothing. And to me, that's everything, the creative aspect. And the great thing, and the fortunate thing, I guess, that I can throw at you at this point in regards to all of this stuff, is that, and I'm very fortunate in this regard, is that most of the projects that have come along, again, doesn't matter what medium, have all been organic. you know, and all felt right at the right time. I've only ever followed through on what my gut tells me these days and what my heart tells me, too many times I've been led astray and taken down the wrong road, and I just it's not worth it. It's really not worth it to be unhappy at the end of the day, or have too many regrets. And I feel privileged being an artist as such, in all these mediums, and again fortunate that I'm able to do so many things, and that in of itself is inspiring.
So creative blocks. I'm sure when you hit a creative block, you probably go get a cup of tea, go get a cup of coffee, whatever. But since this podcast is called Taking a Walk, do you take a
Well,
walk to vet
No,
yourself?
that's what I do. That's exactly what I do. Yeah, I've also, I dealt with a fair amount of depression in my time too, and I still deal with a fair amount of anxiety on occasion where I do feel ultimately overwhelmed by, I almost have that sense of agoraphobia where I can't really leave the house. I don't feel like I can leave the house. And the one thing I know I should do when I feel like that is leave the house. So even if that's to go and get, some milk or some bread, or get a newspaper, but, also I was never really one. Yeah, I was never a gym guy. I never liked no, thanks. I think, to be honest, if you're active in your life anyway, if you move a lot anyway, that's enough for me. I lift and carry heavy stuff around all the time, but the walking aspect of it has absolutely become a priority for me. A lot of that can be weather dependent, especially, if there's not a good spell of weather for a week or two, you can get a bit down on yourself for that. But again, the moment I feel that anxiety come on, I go, I've got to get out, I've got to walk, and whether that's in the mountains. Yeah, I normally I would have to take like a 10-minute drive just to get to a location that is beautiful to walk. So that would be up in the mountains or down by the sea, walking along some peninsula, and also without question taking the camera along with me, because you just never know when you're going to be inspired one way or the other. So yeah, at the minimum 3 times a week for a good while, and generally a power walk. But I'm always inspired when I do that, and I always am able to breathe and feel free and alive and in the moment again, to be able to go back in and go, right, where are we at, and get stuck in again.
I love the teachings of the late Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who is so wonderful, and he talks about it in terms of savoring the moment, really.
Yeah.
And I think taking that walk allows you to savor a moment as well, don't you think?
I think it's probably the only time in the day, bar actually waking up and before you go to bed, and your mind, reels, about life and your day. I think the walking element is really where you are present, completely present. And again, for me, I would have to say it's not dissimilar to how I started when I started taking photographs, which is back in the old days with long haul flights, to America and back in Asia. In the old days, you only had one movie on a projector on the middle of the plane. Once that was over, you're done. We didn't have anything to games and things to play with. We didn't have, 50 other films to watch or do. Most people would go to sleep, but I could never fall asleep on the plane, and I would always stare out the window at the clouds, whether that was, at night or, the sunsets or sunrises. And I'd always be I started taking photographs of the clouds because I thought these are fleeting moments. These last for a second. They will never be the same again. It's just like our lives. So it taught me to be present in the moment and appreciate what was going on at any given point in time. But it also allowed, I think, and that the same for me is true of walking, is that it's a moment where you can do one of two things. You can either empty your mind, blow all the cobwebs out, not think about anything, breathe it all in and just look at the scenery around you and appreciate it. Or it gives you an opportunity away from everything else to clearly think about what you're doing, what your pros and your cons in life. How are you moving? How are you moving forward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I I think you can achieve both. You can actually go in with a head full of questions, and at the end of it, come away with a balance and being able to breathe without that stress. I think it, without questions, a major stress reliever. And I throw a lot of stress on my shoulders. I really do, because I want the work that I'm doing to be the best that it can be. So I'm always, on myself. So those walking moments are very, very special, have become part of the most important thing of my day, really, because it allows me to do everything else.
So I want to talk musical influences if I can. And obviously, the Beatles are a major influence in your life. Do you have particular albums or periods of the Beatles or songs that are, most important to you?
In general, no, not as such. I mean, I, there's a few artists. I mean, yeah, occasionally I'll catch Beatles stuff, on the radio. I mean, because they're still playing it all the bloody time. But I have a few key artists that I love, and I've mentioned these guys many times. It's like Keith Jarrett, the Clone Concert, Steely Dan, pick an album. It's like, that I will always go back to and listen to, if they come to mind. But in general, I have to say that on a listening front, especially when I'm working here in front of the computer, and more often than not, editing collections of photographs and putting things together, I'll have the radio on. And I do have a particular favorite. I don't know whether I should mention it or not, but you can edit it out. But
Absolutely not. I won't.
well, I'm a particular fan and have been for 10 years plus now since I learned of the station. It's called KCRW Eclectic 24, and I always have it on in the background because it always has independent, new up and coming artists, but generally artists that are really creative, really melodic, really unique, and stuff you just don't get to hear on regular radio these days. You're either still dealing with the same kind of top 20, top 40 scenario, or you're not hearing any other new interesting music unless it's a particular station for 70s rock and roll, or, you name it. So at least that station gives me a wide variety of new artists that come through. That it's generally how I learn of new musicians, new singers, new artists that I become a fan of. And once I hear that and use the app to figure out who it is, and then I'll go and find their album, and I'll put that on a play. I'm one of those guys that once you find a good album, it'll be on repeat for the next 3 months until I've had enough. But I'll still always be a fan. But yeah, I've got a couple of key favorites like that.
I think you're the only person I've ever spoken to who can say their range of music that they like spans Keith Jarrett to AC/DC.
Well, Why not? Listen, why, as you can imagine, I think that a lot of artists and a lot of people get pigeonholed all the time. And I've always hated that concept of pigeonholing. I don't understand it. I don't see the logic behind it. For me, art is art, photography is photography, music is music. It doesn't matter what genre or where it comes from. If it gets you feeling at all, whether that's energized or whether that's emotional or whether that's deep thinking or I think everything should be available to you. That's why I wear many hats. I don't want to be in a box. Who says you have to be in a box? No, thank you. If you've got the will and the mind to go for it, then you should go for it. And certainly that's what I've done. And that's why I love every kind of genre of music. But there's not much I don't like. I just happened. I think a lot of kids in their early teens, especially from my era, certainly loved, some serious rock and roll, whether it's, and heavy metal to a degree as well. But, the Ozzy Osbournes, the list goes on. But AC/DC were the first band that I ever saw live at the age of 16. And that was when Bon Scott was singing back in the day, and Angus was on his shoulders. That was a memorable time, And hey, they're still going strong today. It just shows you that the good stuff sticks around.
Yeah, I love it. I first met you in 1984 when Velat came out, and you came to
Another lifetime.
it was a lifetime for me as well. But I was so just impressed with you on how in control of the situation you were, with all the pressure you had to be your own person, and
Yeah.
obviously then coming into the limelight. How did you make it look so easy?
I don't know about that. Well, number one, I think I was so shy for the most part that I kept pretty quiet and pretty much to myself. I think, and I've mentioned this a number of times before, that I had to look to the only person who really I respect and loved throughout my life, which was my mother, Cynthia. And I watched her go through what she had to go through in the public eye with such grace and such poise and elegance. She just showed me that no matter what they throw at you, just keep on keeping on and be strong and believe that you're worth it. Yeah, I know that sounds like a hair commercial these days, but I think you understand what I mean. It's just you, yeah, yeah. What other way out is there? You either deal with things gracefully and move forward, or it becomes a negative and it becomes distractive and it becomes, and then why are you there in the first place? So, it's just a question of learn as you go along, try and hold it all together and just do the best job you can. And that's all I've ever tried to do, really. I think a lot of the problems in retrospect that happened, was the industry itself. That's why I got out of it so many times, because sure, the creativity, the work, the recording and live performance were all joys. But again, the admin, the people behind the scenes, and what they were trying to get out of you, that was another story altogether. And I have to say that there were few and far between good people in the industry, and that's just being absolutely honest. There's always a good few, but they're hard to find someone who is true to themselves and to everybody else.
We'll be right back with more of the Taking a Walk podcast. Welcome back to the Taking a Walk podcast.
Well, you had a couple people, though, who were your core background, if you will, your core foundation back then. One is your lifelong friend, Justin, right? Justin Clayton, and then also for that work in '84, Phil Ramone. Can you talk about both of them? I mean, obviously, you still work and collaborate with Justin, but talk about what those two lads meant to you then and mean to you now.
Well, I mean, Justin and I met when we were 11 years old, so we go way back. I mean, we're literally in touch every other day because, just briefly, the last album, Jude, was made up of songs from 30 years ago and relatively new songs. And we'd been working for 5 years trying to make those older songs sound new.
By the way, Julian,
Yeah.
I think that album deserves more recognition by the public. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. I just don't think enough people have got to hear it. And again, I don't want to say that's the label's fault, but I did everything I could to get it out there. That's for sure. But yeah, Justin and I are still working. We still have boxes of old tracks that well, I mean, I said I'd never do another album last time, but I think really this last album, Jude, was the last. But that doesn't mean I'm stopping by any means. I mean, I'm planning to release like a 3 to 5 song EP of stuff that we're working on right now that I would say is more in tune with a little more indie, a little more Pretenders meets XTC. So I'm looking to have a little bit of fun. The tracks are there already, so it's just about finessing and cleaning them up a bit. But Justin and I think all friends and family members go through their ups and downs, and I'm not going to say it was always roses with everybody. I mean, anybody and everybody in life that happens, but we're still hanging in there 40 years later, 50 years later. Oh, don't even get me counting. So I'm happy for that. I'm happy that we're still, he really is my oldest friend and I trust him musically. He's a great producer, he's a great engineer, a great writer and performer. Phil, of course, it meant the world to me when Atlantic back in the day asked me, who I'd love to produce the first album. And I said Phil Ramone due to Billy Joel's Nylon Curtain album, which there was some Beatlesque elements to that, but there was a quality in his writing and the production that I just fell in love with. And then I just remember receiving a phone call from Phil Ramone, about working together, which I was shocked. I was still a naive young kid at that point in time. Again, we've all had our demons in the past, and Phil certainly had a fair amount of those too. One of the things that saddens me the most was the fact that his dear wife Karen had lupus, and I became the U.S. ambassador for the Lupus Foundation of America because my dear friend Lucy, who was the Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, died of lupus. And at the last event that I was at for the Lupus Foundation of America in New York, I didn't know Phil's wife Karen had lupus, and she was there, and he was there, and it had been the first time I had seen him in years. I'd run into him before, and the relationship was a bit cold, but we saw each other at this gala event in New York, and it was like falling in love again because we got on so well and we'd missed each other so much that we talked about, getting back in the studio together. I was longing for that. And then, of course, it wasn't long after that that he sadly passed, which was a real shocker to me because I felt like it was a book that was never finished. The pages had closed on us too soon, which was a real shame because I felt we had more to do together.
I want to talk about the White Feather Foundation and your great
Sure.
work there. And so would you tell the amazing story
Yeah.
about the white feather, about what your dad said to you, and then how you came upon the white feather ultimately?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell that in reverse order. But yeah, so I was in Australia. I had a number one song at the time called Saltwater, which is an environmental song, which did very well around the world, except America. But that's another story. Anyway, I was in Adelaide. We were on a promo tour, but playing live shows too. And I was approached in the hotel by an indigenous group called the Mirning people. And they wanted to see me down in the lobby. I thought, what's this about? I thought it was a joke at first. I thought it was a prank. The management said, no, no, Mr. Lennon, there's an Aboriginal group down here with some TV crews and a number of people, and they really would like to see you. And I said, all right, well, I don't know what this is about, but I'll go down. And the elevator opens, and there's this so one step up onto this sort of platform, and all these people. I'm going, oh, what is this about? And the elder, who was this woman called Iris, she was the elder of the tribe. She walks up to me, and it's on camera, it's on film, and she presents me with a white feather. It's a male swan's white feather. It's about 15 inches long, something like that. And she said to me, can you help us? You have a voice, or you have a voice. Can you help us? And it was that point in time that I thought, well, or do I continue being a rock and roller, or do I step up to the plate? The real thing about this, and the real reason I did step up to the plate, and that I got goosebumps at this moment in time, was the fact that Dad had said to me, and I couldn't tell you where or when or what time it was. It just wasn't one of those things. But it was clear as day that he said to me, listen, if something happens to me, to let you know that I'm going to be okay, or that we're all going to be okay, it'll be in the form of a white feather. And so when I received that white feather, to me, that was undeniable truth, undeniable connection with the spiritual world. I'm not a religious guy, but spiritual, yes. So from that, I went away and thought about the situation, and I learned about the plight of that particular indigenous tribe, and then the indigenous tribes all across the globe. I mean, like 80 different tribes. And I made a documentary about them called Whale Dreamers. It took 10 years. We we weren't supported. We didn't have sponsors, but we won about 8 international independent film awards. And I thought, if this film does any good, or make some money, I want the money to go back to the indigenous tribes so that they can keep hold of their culture, and buy back their lands that they've been kicked off of, et cetera, et cetera. And the only way I could do that back in those days was to actually do it through a foundation. Hence, the White Feather Foundation was born. So the moment the internet came about, I set up a web page to sell the film, and on videotape, and DVDs eventually. And all of a sudden, I'd start getting these emails saying, well, can you help us? And can you help us? And I'm going, whoa, hold on. I said, listen, I'm not really a foundation. This is a vehicle for the film, if the film makes money, to help the indigenous. But then after so many, I started thinking, well, again, I've got a platform here. I should use it to help those who have no voice, basically. And so I decided that the White Feather Foundation should be something. It should be more than just that. And that's when I decided to follow through on subjects that affected me the most. Number one was Indigenous causes around the world. Number two, clean water. I don't care how many charities there are claiming to do or doing clean water. Everybody deserves to have clean water. So we help where we can. We work with NGOs around the world, doing whatever we can, all based on donations by the public, by the way. So it's thanks to my fans and people out there that see what we're doing, who donate 50 cents, a dollar. Every penny makes a difference. The other things have been health clinics and schools. So health and education is another one of our causes. I always tend to believe that we're not a big foundation. We never went that route. I never wanted to do that. Um, but what I do feel that we do is that a lot of causes, a lot of people get lost between the cracks. What the White Feather Foundation tries to do is catch those causes and again help those people without a voice. Again, thanks to our audience that we get things done. When Mum passed away, I decided to do a scholarship in her name, the Cynthia Lennon Scholarship for Girls, where we put young girls from Africa and around the world, in fact, but predominantly in Africa through college and university. Many of them that I spoke to want to go back to their little towns and be lawyers to help protect their families and their friends from the villages that they came from. So it's a nice circle that how that operates. But yeah, so it's always been a very important thing. And the only other thing I'll say about it is that whatever hat I'm wearing, if I'm making any money, then a proportion of whatever I make, whether it's the book sales, whether it's the documentary, whether it's the music or the children's books, proportion of the money that I make certainly goes to the White Feather Foundation to keep it ticking along, so I can pay everybody that works there. But that's how we roll. And again, thanks for the donations, because without people, we wouldn't exist.
Bravo, bravo. So you mentioned, though, spirituality back there, and I produce this other podcast. It's called Music Saved Me. It's about the healing power of music.
Right.
Do you personally believe music has healing powers?
Yeah, that without question. Without question. I can't be precise in how it does that, but certainly with certain sounds, moods, tones, elevations, arrangements, styles, you can certainly be lifted out of the doldrums. You can certainly become more introspective and be able to work on yourself through that mode as well. Yeah, I mean, music is it's not my go-to on a personal level, but certainly there'll be moments where I just decide that I want to sit down and I'll say, I'll just open the windows and open the doors and play a bit of music. And that again will allow me what I will now call a cloud moment, which is where you find those moments of peace and think about nothing, or you think about everything, you know? And I think just having that connection alone allows you to move forward and be motivated and make some important decisions in life. So yeah, it's definitely music affects your rhythm, your soul, your heart, your mind, absolutely, without question.
Can you take me back to your first experiences with a camera?
The first I recall, well, it's a bit difficult to say, but because I just remember as a kid that pretty much every family on the planet, whether they had a real camera or whether they had one of those throwaway cameras that you used to buy at the pharmacy or the airport, and you take it back the next day and they'd print it out for you. Those those were for taking a snap of a moment in time. They weren't You weren't focusing, you weren't dealing with any of the technical aspects of it. Yeah, I remember I used to have one of those, or mum used to have, or we shared the camera. I think the first time a camera became relevant at all was probably visiting dad I think it was in New York. I know that there were cameras around, and I know that also when he had his lost weekend with May Pang, that she was a photographer, so there were cameras around. But I think the one thing, and it's funny, I was talking about this before, the one thing that excited me the most was a camera that dad had called the Polaroid SX70 land camera, which is the one I have here. The reason I was intrigued about this, because I was fascinated by its look and its feel and how it unfolded, and from a flat block became this really quite unique camera. And I loved the fact that you didn't have to do any developing. And you see, so I fell in love with this camera and played around with it a lot. I have many filed away pictures, a lot of black and white, high contrast, but color stuff too. But and then that kind of fell to the wayside, and I was far more involved in music again. But I think when the true interest in photography came back for me, although I did try working with film and camera, but I was a bit clumsy on that front. And although I have great patience for some things, I have little for others. So fiddling around with film and trying to get that right and go, oh no, and blowing, and losing the pictures and so when digital came along, digital cameras, I went, there you go. There we go. That's for me. That's when I fell in love with taking pictures again, and the fact that it was that instant gratification of knowing that you'd got something pretty much straight away. And then my challenge to myself was, how do I make digital pictures look like they're film? That was something that I worked on for a number of years in trying to finesse digital photography to look like real film. How the realization of what I was doing was the right thing came along was I was part of a Britpop exhibition in Amsterdam of a number of British photographers, and I was cornered by this fine art critic from America, this older lady, and she'd cornered me from some time, and I couldn't get out of the conversation. I was a bit shy. Anyway, at the end of it, she said to me, "So, tell me, do you work with film or digital?" And I went, "You tell me." I realized at that point in time that I'd done it, that I'd risen to that challenge. And so from that point on, I just tried to do better and better and better and better every time I'm doing photography work from now on, is trying to finesse it that much more relatable, that much more focused. And again, doing the photography book and the exhibition really was a learning curve on how to be more focused and more precious about the work that you're delivering. How can you tell the same story of 50 images in 5 images? That kind of thing. It really has helped me hone my craft more than before having done the book and the exhibition. So that was a win-win for me. All that hard work, I learned a lot from that.
Do you have a go-to camera for those quick walks that you can, just sort of have with you just in,
I hate to say it. I hate to say it. Even well-known photographers that I know that love their cameras admit that sometimes you just take a shot on your phone, and the quality these days is almost, not quite, but almost as equal to a good camera. You don't quite have the lens quality or quite the depth of field and a few other things, but certainly, you can nab some pretty darn good shots on your phone, and obviously the ease of just having it in your pocket. It just makes life a lot easier. I'm afraid to say, I mean, they're so far ahead now that people are doing movies on their phones. It's crazy, but leaps and bounds. Certainly, things have come along leaps and bounds. But I still have a couple of go-to cameras that and I've said this before. Well, what's your favorite camera? Well, listen, it's not really the camera at the end of the day. It's not the hardware. It's what you see and what you get out of what you're trying to relate emotively, and what the story is and the message. So the camera doesn't really matter at the end of the day, but certain cameras do certain things a little better than other cameras. But at the moment, and I've always been a fan of Leicas, because they are classic cameras. I've done exhibitions around the world with these guys. I think I'm up to, with Venice, I'm up to exhibition 42 in the last 10 years or whatever. So I've been working. My favorite chuck it in my bag camera I have to say, is the Leica Q3 at the moment, which you can use on auto or manual. So it gives you the best of both worlds. And, the quality, the quality is beautiful. The pictures are gorgeous.
Who are some photographers you admire?
That's a difficult one because a lot of names I don't remember. I know that sounds terrible, but if I was to give you just one guy that has been a mainstay for me, obviously there's Timothy White, because he got me into this mess in the first place. Although his photography is more celebrity orientated and more fashion and celebrity and film orientated, he's still a tremendous photographer. But my kind of cup of tea, dare I say, would be the likes of Elliot Erwitt, Ansel Adams. The classics. I mean, there's some other great stuff out there. But whenever I'm asked what's your favorite, who's your favorite, my mind goes blank. It's one of those, what can I say? It just, useless. I'm bloody useless.
I don't think so. So I know you're pals with the boys in U2, and they had that run at that place in Las Vegas called the Sphere.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
You were there. So what's your impression of that experience?
It's a bit of a weird one, I have to say, because your attention is certainly drawn to the visuals, because you're seeing little people that look like ants running around on this little stage down below. But you're taken in by the actual visuals of the experience. On one hand, I'm not sure what to make of it. And I'm not sure is it worth having a live band there? Because I think the reality is you're obviously you're listening to the experience, but it's more of a visual experience too, from at least my perspective. And I just wanted to see this wraparound 3D, or this almost 360-degree screen, where you're being drawn into this otherworldly experience. And yeah, it was nice having the band there, but I don't want to say they were insignificant, because that would be totally and wholly incorrect. But it was, for me, predominantly a visual draw at the end of the day than a live band draw. You could have just played the music from their albums and put the visuals on, and it would have been, no disrespect, but it would have been just as exciting in many respects. Not that there weren't a few moments, certainly with the live situation, but I think this is very early days with this kind of setup and this technology. And I think it'll only get better and improve even more as they hone down what it actually means to do a show like that there. I know that they're building smaller versions of the Sphere, which may be more helpful for the band, so that there's still that relative relationship between the live music and the audience, and the expanse of some of the visuals. But with the Spear, it's kind of OTT. It's mesmerizing, and I just think the live band scenario it gets a little lost, but still a bit jaw dropping. But with the band like U2, they've always been at the forefront of unique stage presentations. So in many respects, I expected nothing less. Like, what did you think? I said, well, I expected nothing less. That's what I expected. I was blown away, but I kind of expected it, which is a weird thing to say, but that's how I feel.
Well, congratulations on Life's Fragile Moments, which is going to make a great, I would say, stocking stuffer, but it's a little bit big, maybe for a style. But it could be a stocking stuffer. It'll look nicely under the tree. And congratulations on it. And I have to just tell you, when I think of how grateful I am doing this podcast, this is one of those moments where I'm doubly grateful for doing this podcast, for an opportunity to speak with you, Julian. I appreciate everything about you and that you continue to give us. I'm so grateful, and thank you for being on the Taking a Walk podcast.
Thank you, Buzz. It's been my absolute pleasure, and I hope to see you sooner than later. Maybe on a walk one day.
I'd love it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Taking a Walk podcast. Share this and other episodes with your friends and follow us so you never miss an episode. Taking a Walk is available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.